the rolling fields of Lothian, Maryland. Sleepy, green, and usually peaceful.
It was just a very rural, quiet, very quiet neighborhood, not a whole lot of activity down there.
But a house in this neighborhood would soon crumble under a bizarre drama of sex and murder.
No one would expect something like this in that small little chunk of Anne Arundel County.
The mystery begins with a 911 call.
Anne Arundel County 911.
But this 911 call is strange. Listen.
I just spent the day taking kids to the dentist and then going grocery shopping. I'm supposed to be leaving to take my husband to a doctor's appointment right now.
The call is so matter-of-fact, so nonchalant, and buries the most important detail.
But he's not responding at all, and he's got his gun laying next to him in the bed.
Do you think he shot himself?
I don't know. I didn't turn the lights on in the room.
Was she frantic?
She was strangely calm on her 911 call, not frantic at all.
Police arrived to find this charming home on West Bayfront Road is packed to the rafters with clutter and dark secrets.
She's actually still on the phone with 911 when the officers respond.
The caller is a 42-year-old housewife and mother of 5, Anastasi, a composed, almost shy woman who seems indifferent to her husband's condition.
She's not hysterical.
No.
She's not crying.
No.
She just says, my husband committed suicide.
Essentially, yes. Very flat.
Anne leads officers through the crates of food and laundry to the upstairs bedroom.
The bedroom was not clean or tidy. That was just how they lived. There were papers, books, movies, clothes, both dirty and clean on the floor.
And on the bed, officers find Anne's husband, Anthony Anastasi, shot in the temple, a .45 caliber pistol just inches from his outstretched arm.
He was lying face up in the bed. There was a single gunshot wound, we could tell, that had been fired at close range based on stippling, which is burning to the skin that comes from a bullet coming out of a muzzle of a gun. But it definitely looked like a suicide, by all accounts.
Anne tells investigators she'd stumbled upon Anthony's body after dropping off her older kids at school, taking a younger one to the dentist, and grocery shopping with her 13-year-old daughter, who was home sick from school that day. The humdrum routine of any large family until
she gets back home and her husband is in bed, motionless, not responding.
Anne tells police Anthony had been depressed.
The evidence that we got, mostly through Anne, was that he had had numerous back surgeries, and so he was unable to work at the time.
The officers begin the grim task of documenting a suicide.
They, in fact, asked if anyone else resided in the home and named her children, many of whom were at school.
Oh, and there's someone else, Anne says. A 25-year-old house guest, Jacqueline Riggs, who lives in the basement apartment.
Jacqueline Riggs was a young lady in her early 20s, seemed very kind of down on her luck. It seemed like she latched onto Anthony Anastasi as an older male, maybe a fatherly type figure to her that gave her a lot of attention. They asked if she was home. She said, well, I don't know. I hadn't heard from her today.
The last thing Anne did hear was on the previous night. It was Anthony shouting and fighting with Jacqueline in the basement.
When he returned to the master bedroom and encountered Anne, she said that he was very, very gruff with her, very short with her, told her to take the cats out of the room and go sleep with the children in an adjoining bedroom.
Police descend to the darkened staircase to the basement room and stumble into a scene from hell.
When we first entered the basement, there was extremely loud, heavy metal music playing, which added, for us, an additional kind of eerie effect.
And in the center of the room, it's more than eerie. It's an image of absolute horror. On a blood-soaked carpet lies the butchered body of Jacqueline Riggs.
Stabbed multiple times all about her body. Torso, head, neck, arms, hands, legs even.
42 savage knife wounds, stabbed 20 times, and slashed 22 more.
There was blood on the walls, blood on the floor, blood on the bed. It was clear that Jacqueline Riggs had fought her attacker based on defensive wounds to her hands and arms.
In the thick of the gruesome scene, Detective Poole notes additional evidence. The outside door, locked. The windows screwed shut. The room strewn with piles of overturned trash.
It looked like perhaps he had stabbed her in the basement and then gone upstairs.
And at this point, you're working on the murder-suicide theory.
Correct. All indications were showing us a murder-suicide.
But those initial indications would be deceiving. Over the next few days, baffling details emerge, ones that turn the case on its head.
We were notified by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner that Mr. Anastasi still had a projectile in his head. And
it's a game changer.
It was a game changer. At this point, we knew that we were not dealing with a murder-suicide.
Coming up, right bullet, wrong gun.
At that point, all bets are off.
And
Anthony and Jacqueline were in a three-way relationship.
with 2 in the 3-way dead, case closed? Not so fast.
The more we learned, the more we were shocked. Every part of this was shocking to the soul.
A beautiful home in Lothian, Maryland. Outside, open fields of green. Inside, clutter, death, and horror.
We thought as homicide investigators we were responding to a murder-suicide.
Down in the basement, a pretty 25-year-old girl viciously stabbed to death. Upstairs, a 40-year-old father of 5 dead from a single gunshot wound. But as detectives comb through the crime scene, they unearth a mystery.
The home was not easily searched. It was not a tidy home. It was not an organized home.
And buried in the clutter, a clue. Upstairs in Anthony's bedroom, hidden amongst the stacked VHS cases and only inches from a Holy Bible, a .45 caliber bombshell.
We found a spent shell casing in the bedroom near Mr. Anastasi and the handgun that was next to him.
Forensics labs compare that casing to the slug retrieved from Anthony's body.
The projectile recovered from Mr. Anastasi was a .380. That matched the shell casing.
What? Cops are shocked. The slug is not a match to the .45 caliber handgun found at Anthony's side.
As soon as you see that he has a .45 caliber gun in his hand, you know that something's off, because it's physically impossible for a .45 caliber to fire that .380. They actually tested that and found if you put a .380 round into that .45 caliber gun, it would just fall out the end.
It just didn't work.
It just didn't work.
So the gun next to him was not what was used to shoot him.
So what really happened in this house of death?
It was in fact not a murder-suicide. It was a cold-blooded double murder.
Now the question, who did it?
Sit right here for me.
Detectives bring Anthony's wife, Ann Anastasi, along with their 13-year-old daughter down to the station to see what they may have seen or heard that horrible morning. And Ann tells cops what was really going on in the house on West Bayfront Road, starting, Ann says, with the abuse.
What's the worst threat he ever made towards you?
Held his gun to my head and told me to get out of his house.
And when was that?
That would have been a couple months ago.
Okay.
And I'm told if I ever tell the police about it, I ever tell anybody about it, he's going to kill me and whoever I tell.
Very controlling relationship is what she described, but also, by some accounts, a caring, loving, nurturing father. It just depended on who you talked to, and the children respected and loved him.
And apparently, the 25-year-old in the basement also loved Anthony Anastasi. Ann says Jacqueline Riggs wasn't just a house guest.
The family friend was likely more than just a friend to the husband. Is that right?
That's correct. The family lived in Michigan for a period of time and struck up a, if you will, like a 3-way romantic relationship when they were in Michigan.
That 3-way? Anthony, Ann, and Jacqueline Riggs?
The reported from Ann was some intimate contact, but that Ann was not a fan of that. And so after that one incident, she refused to participate in that ever again.
Ann refuses, but Anthony insists.
Anthony tells Ann one day, I'm moving Jacqueline to Maryland and she's going to reside in the home with us.
By then, Ann says it was a twosome, and Ann was the odd one out.
I have to ask this question, Ann. Do you think that your husband and Jacqueline were messing around?
Oh, I know they were.
They were, and how do you know they were?
Because he'd spend he'd spend a lot of nights down there with the doors locked.
Okay.
Like a lot of them.
Did you ever confront him about it?
I was told that basically to mind my own business. He's going to do what he wants to do, and if I don't like it, I can get the out of the house.
Okay.
And I'm not going to abandon my kids and leave them in that kind of situation.
Asked if there was any jealousy in the new arrangement, Ann tells cops, no way.
So I'd regularly tell him, well, she needs to get out. If you're going to stay with her, then you can both get out. Why are you here in the house if you don't want to be with me? You two can just pack up and go.
To prove it, Ann readily submits to a gunpowder test, gets her cheek swabbed for DNA, hands over her cell phone, and has no problem getting strapped in for a polygraph exam. If Ann is nervous, she doesn't show it.
It's going to matter if I'm yawning during this.
Her answers are simple and direct.
Have you been untruthful during this investigation?
No.
Did you shoot your husband?
No.
Ann was extremely cooperative during the initial interview. You know, every question we had, she did not hesitate to answer.
But things aren't as calm in the other interrogation room down the hall, where police question Ann's 13-year-old daughter.
13-year-old was extremely distraught by the death of her father. Very erratic, at one point tried to run out of our building. It was a lot of trauma for her.
And the traumatized girl is talking a lot, including the story of a blink and you'd miss it clue collected from the basement crime scene, a used pregnancy test.
Did the teenager reveal to you at some point maybe she overheard a conversation about Jacqueline and her father wanting to have a baby?
That's correct. The 13-year-old and her father had a very close father-daughter relationship. And we think when she overheard her father and Jacqueline talking about possibly having another baby, it definitely fueled some jealous rage.
Then, cops take a look at the girl's cell phone and compare it to Ann's.
We were actually getting back a lot of detailed text messages between Ann, her 13-year-old daughter, and another person of interest who developed from a phone number.
That's when Ann's story started to fall apart a little bit.
A father of 5 shot point blank in the head upstairs. His 25-year-old lover slaughtered in the basement. Who did it? Wife and mother of 5, Anastasi says it's all a mystery to her.
2 people were murdered in your home, brutally murdered, okay? And you didn't know what happened.
No.
But as investigators put the pieces together,
none of us on the team felt like things were completely adding up for us.
the cool-headed Ann had already allowed herself to be tested for gunshot residue. She took a polygraph test and let cops take a close look at her cell phone. Now detectives bring her back to the station to share the results.
There's a couple things I need to clear up real quick.
Certainly.
The test that they took from your clothes and your hands, well, they were all sent off.
Probably found lots of cat milk on there.
Well, we found a lot of gunshot residue on you and on the clothes.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's weird.
Cops tell Ann there's something else that's weird. The results of her polygraph test.
You have a failed polygraph. You not just failed it, you flunked the hell out of it.
They inform her of the inconsistent ballistics.
The gun that was found next to your husband was tested, okay? And compared to the bullet that was found in his skull, okay? There is no possible way that that weapon fired that bullet that was in your husband's head.
And most damning of all, what cops found in Ann's cell phone. A long call with her 13-year-old daughter at 3 a.m., shortly after the murders.
We got some phone records, and that night, you and talked for 582 seconds, 3 in the morning. That's about 10 minutes.
That might have been a butt dial.
That's not a butt dial. That's a long conversation.
Cops know that call was not an accident.
And this is bad for you. This is real bad for you. You understand that?
In fact, they've also got Ann's 13-year-old daughter's cell phone records. Cops say text messages show Ann and her daughter were actually planning the murders, getting rid of an abusive husband and the young woman they thought was tearing the family apart. And who they get to do their dirty work is a shocker. The daughter's 18-year-old boyfriend, Gabriel Strauss.
Gabriel didn't have the best upbringing, kind of raised himself. He needed that emotional comfort that he got from this family.
They convince the boyfriend that Anthony and his much younger lover, Jacqueline, are evil abusers, and mom and daughter entice him to kill with an offer he can't refuse.
Anne actually said that he could come and live at their home once the two people were killed.
She lured him with this idea
Yes,
of giving him stability and giving him a home and giving him a family.
absolutely.
And it seems like he so desperately wanted that he would kill for it.
Exactly.
They even planned out the murder plot.
There was a text message that was sent from Mr. Struss that said, I'm going to slit the girl and bust the dad. So they clearly had already worked out the manner in which each was going to be killed.
When cops confront Struss, they aren't greeted by a crazed killer. Instead, they find a guilt-stricken teen who instantly confesses and reveals Ann Anastasi is the mastermind of the whole brutal plan. The night of the murders, Anne and her daughter pick up Gabriel Struss. He lays in wait in their backyard for hours until everyone else is asleep. Then,
Ms. Anastasi is there in the kitchen where she meets him. She hands him the .380 caliber handgun that he would use later on in the evening against Mr. Anastasi. He had the gun in his hoodie pocket and had the knife in his hand, and he went downstairs to where Ms. Riggs was sleeping.
Jacqueline Riggs was asleep in her bed
Yes.
when she was viciously attacked.
Yes.
So she woke up to basically being stabbed.
Yes. A grand total of 42 injuries.
She was fighting for her life.
Absolutely. And Mr. Struss made it clear that he didn't leave the basement until he was certain that she had passed away. He comes back upstairs. Mr. Struss then takes the handgun and fires a single round into Mr. Anastasi's temple.
cops say Anastasi's 13-year-old daughter then takes Gabriel home. While they're away, Anne races in and plants a gun. As it turns out, the wrong gun in Anthony's hand. The next morning, Anne and her daughter wake up feeling guilty? Nope, hungry.
Got up, ate breakfast, got dressed, took a shower with Dad dead in the bedroom and Jacqueline murdered in the basement. That's pretty disturbing.
Gabriel's confession brings the whole house of cards crashing down on Ann Anastasi and her daughter. The three are arrested for the killings, including 2 counts each for first-degree murder.
Who do you believe was the mastermind?
Absolutely Ann Anastasi.
Anne maintains her innocence, insisting on taking her case to court. But then, in jail and awaiting trial, the sinister Black Widow is caught up in her own web of lies.
This call will be recorded and subject to monitoring at any time.
A fairly incriminating phone call was made between her and someone on the outside that we happened to get our hands on.
And there she was, letting her true feelings show.
Even though we all think that the world is a better place for him being gone, and that her stupid twit should have known something was going to happen, getting 12 jurors to see the same thing is a problem.
Anne thinks she's off the record, so the claws and the motive for murder come out.
The problem is, it's not only him. There's also a 24-year-old girl who was dead in my basement. She was moved into my house with me and my 5 kids. Her should have stayed up in Michigan. She shouldn't have moved down here. She shouldn't have moved into my house. How could you possibly have thought that was going to go well?
It was certainly something that, once we heard that, made our case significantly stronger.
When Anne's defense team is confronted with the cause, they beg her to take a plea deal to avoid what could be a devastating trial. She takes it and is sentenced to 2 life sentences. The 44-year-old is expected to spend at least the next 60 years behind bars.
I do not expect that she'll ever step foot out of a prison. She represents a different type of evil because while Gabriel Struss wielded the weapon, he was very much a puppet of Miss Anastasi, and to me that is more sinister than just literally pulling the trigger.
As for the 2 teens who fell under her spell,
her 13-year-old daughter is in a juvenile facility. She will be eligible for release at 21.
18-year-old Gabriel Struss gets the same deal as Anne, 2 life sentences, with all but 60 years suspended. But unlike the den mother in this diabolical scheme, he tells Crime Watch Daily he'll always regret what he did, and he sent this note to me from prison, writing, quote, "I thought what I was doing would make me a hero, when in reality, it only made me a monster. So many people were hurt because of my actions. I hope the victim's family can one day forgive me and understand how sorry I am. Forgiveness may be a long time coming. The magnitude of the tragedy extends beyond the two who lost their lives that horrible night.
We have 2 people dead. We have 3 in jail. We have 4 children who lost both parents and a sibling, all because of lust and sex and love and hatred. That's what fueled this whole fire.